Oh, hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, depending on what part of this beautiful country that you're in. Welcome to the Rebel News Daily Roundup. I'm your host, Sheila Gunn Reid. I'm joined by my astute co-host, Tamara Ugolini. Tamara, how's it going? How was trick-or-treating last night? Did you guys do that?
It was mayhem, but before I continue, can you hear me okay? I just want to make sure that I have everything
Yeah.
connected.
Mhm.
Perfect. Yes, trick or treating. It was such a good time. We have very young children, so we start really early, and sometimes people aren't quite ready yet, and so I know that they're mad that we're out there before the sun is going down. But the kids always have a really fun time. Actually, my youngest wanted to do it again tonight, so unfortunately, he has to
Aw.
wait an entire year until the next round. But what about you? I know you're super into Halloween.
I am super into Halloween, but because I live literally in the middle of nowhere, I don't get a ton of kids that I'm not related to. And but and I hate to use the term luring, but that's what I try to do with my Halloween decorations. I put them out kind of early, and then because I want the neighborhood to know that's the house to go to. But because I don't get a lot of kids, I feel like I'm the weird old lady who won't let them leave the door because like because as Key and Simone will know, I love to talk to little kids. Like I love to hold a conversation with little kids. I just remember being little and being so excited that a grown up cared what I was thinking, and so I try to do that with little kids when I see them. And you can tell, like the little kids are like, "Okay, thanks. Just put the candy in the bag so I can just go out of here." And I'm like, "So what kind of superhero are you?" Are you, what's that man? Bugman? And the kid's like, no, no, Spider-Man, obviously Spider-Man. I'm like, what kind of princess are you? I don't know what kind. And she's like, oh, Cinderella. How do you not know Cinderella? I just like to annoy little kids at the door. Sort of like what I'm doing right now with our viewers who are like, Sheila, shut up and get on to the news. Tamara, why don't you tell everybody what we're doing? And then, because I've already talked too much, and we'll get into the news of the day because there's just a ton of stuff going on, particularly with the carbon tax war and the NDP
Yeah.
figuring out that the carbon tax actually hurts people. So that's an amazing turn of events, but take it away.
Finally, I guess better late than never is what they
Right.
say. Yeah, so I'm a little bit rusty, so I apologize in advance. And hello, everyone. It's been a while since I've joined you on the live stream, but today is Wednesday, November the 1st, the day after Halloween, obviously, based on our little introduction there. And you can find us streaming on a few different platforms. We are on Rumble, YouTube, Twitter, and I'm missing one there. Is it Odyssey, Getter? Obviously, I can't remember. But anyway, YouTube is the censorious one, and they have demonetized our channel completely, going back, I guess, about 2 years now. So the way to engage with us and get your comment read on screen is a nifty little tool on Rumble, the free speech platform, where we are also streaming. And you can send us a Rumble rant through a small monetary donation on that channel, and we will read your comment live on air. It's a great way for you to get our feedback or just provide some commentary, have your opinion read live to the rest of the Rebel audience. So it's always really fun to read those and get a feel for everybody else's thoughts and what their opinions are. And it's also a great way for you to support our independent from the government journalism, as most of you probably already know, but in case you don't, we don't take a dime from the Justin Trudeau Liberals, nor would we ever, and thus we rely on the generosity of our viewers and our donors to support our work. And a great way to do that and also get a little bit of bang for your buck, I suppose, is to give us a Rumble rant. So everybody who might be joining us on some of those other platforms, head on over to Rumble, give us a Rumble rant. If you have something specific to add to our commentary, or maybe even if not, we may save the comment till the end to read it, so that we can stay pointed and on topic. And as Sheila mentioned, we have a ton of things to run through today on this lovely Wednesday. We're halfway through the week. And yeah, it's the carbon tax war between the fiscal conservative Pierre Poilievre and the, I don't even know, liberal, just spending spree of the Justin Trudeau government. So the first video that we have to share with you is our Deputy Prime Minister, that's also our Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, who, of course, is claiming that the carbon tax is the most efficient way to address climate change. And Sorry, before we run that video, anybody who doesn't know, in Canada, we have an exclusive to us, yay, carbon tax that basically, well, taxes all of your consumption of carbon. And of course, Canadians are facing record inflation, record cost of living. There's a housing crisis in pretty much every province and territory in the country. And Canadians are really struggling. Food banks are seeing a massive increase in visits to use their services. And as we approach the deadly cold Canadian winters in most provinces and territories, a lot of people are really stressing about how they're going to not only afford groceries for their families, but also heat their homes and fuel their cars. So the Liberals are obviously pushing back on the scrutiny of this.
Canada and around the world is absolutely clear. And the verdict is that this is the most efficient way to address climate change. It is the most efficient way to reduce emissions. That's something that the IMF has pointed out. The IMF has very explicitly commended Canada's price on pollution as a model for countries around the world.
I don't think anybody's looking at Canada.
Also, everything she said there is a complete and total lie. So Tiff Macklem, head of the Bank of Canada, just said the other day, I think in a House of Commons committee, that it's not reducing emissions. However, it is reducing the size of your bank account by driving up inflation 16%. And to say that it reduces emissions, well, that's fascinating because emissions went up under the Liberals. So they bring in the carbon tax, emissions go up. Emissions go up every single year in British Columbia, the province that has had a carbon tax in place the longest. You know where emissions fell, by the way? In the United States under President Trump, because the most efficient way to reduce emissions, if you care about those sorts of things, and I actually don't, but if you do, then you would be opening up land for fracking, because that immediately drove down emissions in the United States. It was frack, baby frack, drill, baby drill, and emissions went down. So reducing the barriers to more efficient ways of energy production, and by energy production, I mean the reliable fossil fuel kind, that's how you drive down emissions. But no wonder Canada's in such a state, because our finance minister is someone who doesn't understand how finances work, and actually she led to the destruction of an entire department of Reuters when she was in charge there. They had to shutter that department of Reuters because of her financial mismanagement, and Justin Trudeau said, you know, that's the lady, that's the one to be in charge of the economy. And even the Liberals don't believe this garbage, because they just cut a carbon tax exemption for much of Atlantic Canada. So if the Liberals actually care about reducing emissions, why then don't they, why are they reducing the tax on a very inefficient fossil fuel, which is heating oil, while continuing to hammer natural gas in the rest of the country?
Yeah, and especially, you know, it's so ironic coming also from the Liberals, who are all about equality. And here they are giving preferential treatment to certain provinces and not to everyone equally. And of course, in swoops Conservative leader of the opposition, Pierre Poilievre. And so he's just announced a new motion to extend the carbon tax pause for all Canadians, not just those Atlantic provinces, but everybody. And he very brazenly challenges Trudeau to an election to see if Canadians, in fact, want to continue to pay more to heat, eat, and house themselves, to use his words, or whether they want a common sense conservative government.
So he admits that natural gas is cleaner and lower emitting, and that's exactly why he's going to penalize Canadians for using it. Mr. Speaker, he says he wants to bring in a pause for some people in some places. I want to get rid of the tax for all people in all places and forever. But wait, why don't we let Canadians decide? Why doesn't the Prime Minister pause the tax across the country until Canadians go to the polls so we can have a carbon tax election and Canadians can choose his plan to quadruple the tax or my plan to axe the tax.
It is amazing to me that after 3 failed elections in a row by the Conservatives, they still want to fight another election on denying climate change, on denying the costs of climate change. After the summer we've had, they continue to say no plan against climate change is what's good for Canadians, good for our economy, good for businesses. They are wrong, and Canadians are going to show them that once again. In homes across the country that heat with natural gas, the carbon price delivers more, the carbon rebate delivers more than the carbon price costs in 8 out of 10 homes across the country. That is why and how we are fighting climate change and putting more money back in people's pockets. With home heating oil that is dirty, more expensive, we're phasing it out and replacing it with free heat pumps if the provinces sign up.
I don't know about you, Sheila, but I don't really want a free heat pump. I just don't want to pay more tax at the pump. And I think that that's the whole point here is that, that Justin Trudeau is clinging to the idea that, well, we'll just continue to tax you. We'll just tax, and then we'll give you a small percentage or a fraction of that back so that it looks like you're getting reimbursed for all of those taxes to change the average weather patterns. I mean, that's what climate change is all about, apparently. If you're looking at it from the climate hysteria viewpoint, it's the changing weather patterns. And so I am still very unclear on how taxing people changes weather patterns. But obviously there is something more at play here where the intent of the carbon tax is to actually just keep you more stagnant and prevent you from traveling, unlike the elites who will continue to fly to the globalist conferences and Davos and World Economic Forum meetings and UN agenda stuff and the World Health Organization. All these people, they're going to continue to travel unabated. But us, the little guys, the plebs, we have to stay home and save our carbon. And this really kind of turns into a bit of a racket, in my opinion. And so it's just a matter of whether or not the NDP will finally rise up and end their unofficial coalition with the Liberals. Otherwise, this motion obviously doesn't stand a chance in the House of Commons, despite the fact that many Canadians agree that this is so very much needed.
Well, the Liberals are 10 points down in the polls consistently. And Justin Trudeau, I think he knows that, which is why he dished out that carbon tax exemption to Atlantic Canada, because Liberal MPs in Atlantic Canada were breaking ranks with the Liberals. So he realizes there are seats to be lost in Liberal strongholds over the issue of affordability. And so that's why he extended that carbon tax exemption to them. He also knows that it is a blue wave out here on the prairies and to the interior of British Columbia. And so by hammering us with the carbon tax, what are we going to do? Vote for the Conservatives harder? Like, like this is the problem with Confederation, is that you can suck up to one portion of the country for votes and completely hammer another part of the country, and you don't really pay a price for it as a Liberal prime minister because of where all the votes are held, where the power's held. And this leads to Albertans being constantly disgruntled within Confederation. And however, I must tell you that Rachel Notley just had a moment of lucidity. Our NDP leader here in Alberta. Will go to this clip from, or is it a tweet clip? It doesn't matter. Rachel Notley. Yes. So Rachel Notley, she says, and this is a motion brought forward in the House or in the legislature in Alberta, because we're just started our fall session here. And she wants the federal government to extend the carbon tax holiday, I guess, to Alberta. She says if Atlantic Canada is being given a break on their home heating bills, Alberta should too. We will bring this motion in the legislature tomorrow to demand that relief. Okay, she's got a moment of lucidity here. because she sees which way the wind is blowing, and people are affordability is an issue, even here in Alberta, where our average income is a little higher. Our cost of living is substantially lower than places like Toronto. I don't know how people stay afloat there, own things, houses, cars, go on vacations. It seems like an impossibility to me. But the problem with all of this is Notley brought in the carbon tax here before the feds did. So she brought in the carbon tax here in 2015 in advance of Justin Trudeau bringing in the national one. She's been a proponent of carbon taxes across the board. Normal people like me have been saying, no, this makes everything more expensive. And she has been a subscriber to the Ponzi scheme theory, where if you just give the government some of your money, they'll give you more of it back. That's crazy. If you said that in the private sector, you'd be arrested for running a pyramid scheme, but whatever. So why is she now saying, yeah, actually adding the carbon tax makes home heating more expensive? Yes, we know, Rachel. We've been telling you that for 8 years now. But now, since it's politically expedient and she can see which way the wind is blowing, she's jumping on that bandwagon too.
Yeah, the irony in all of this unfolding and the way that it's affected the Liberals and clearly the NDP in the polls is so funny to watch if it weren't so horribly sad simultaneously, because it is the everyday Canadian who is suffering at the hands of these ill-informed, horribly executed policies. Not that this was a good policy to begin with. Clearly, the fallout of it is devastating, especially on the heels of this global pandemic. And I use the word pandemic to refer primarily to the way that the government responded to a seasonal, quote unquote, novel pathogen, and not necessarily the attack of a novel pathogen itself. And so I think the confounding factors that are at play here socioeconomically have really created a dire financial landscape across the country, which many economists and politicians could see the writing in the wall. It just, for some reason, the Liberals and the NDP were completely unable and inept to be able to have that foresight and that fortitude. And now you see this, as we already mentioned, this war in the House of Commons, and happening also in the individual provinces and territories, saying, hold on a minute, this makes no sense. And the thing is that on the federal level, like, obviously Justin Trudeau has the power and the means to say, we hear you. We're taking these really devastating concerns seriously, and we're going to axe the tax. I mean, that to me, whether it's politically gainful or not, that helps your country's citizenry to stay afloat in these really trying economic times. And so for a politician to not acknowledge that and to not take action to actually do that, I mean, it would be a national embarrassment, but I don't know how much more embarrassing you could be as Justin Trudeau, who's the laughingstock of political theater on a global stage. So to help your citizenry stay afloat, at the very least, I think that that's a pretty low bar for a prime minister. And the longer this drags on, you just see that he's obviously not based in any sort of moral code or ethical conviction, because he's just clinging on to this failed policy, it seems like, to the very, very, very bitter end.
Yeah, like, if you boil it all down to the very base, and I've done a lot of thinking about carbon taxes since 2015, but at the end of the day, the Liberals want you to believe that if you give them money, they can change the weather. And if you add a tax, which increases the costs of everything, that somehow you will have more money in your pocket at the end of the day. Like, the claims they make about the carbon tax, which increases the cost of literally everything. You have to move everything in this country. You have to grow everything in this country. You have to make everything in this country. You have to heat everything in this country and cool everything in this country. It is a tax on a tax on a tax. And it is added every step along the way, along the supply chain, from the farming inputs to the end product being cooled in the grocery store or packaged and then cooled in the grocery store. And yet the Liberals want you to believe that adding something to the cost of doing business every step of the way will result in more money in your pocket. And they actually thought that they could keep that facade up for so long. People now are really, the people who said at the beginning, okay, well, whatever, let's just let them have this one little tax. Now that it keeps going up and up, even the true believers in carbon taxes are like, heck no. And it remains to be seen what Jagmeet Singh will do, because Pierre Poilievre challenged Jagmeet Singh as the leader of the federal party in a tweet to adopt Rachel Notley's ideas of extending a pause on the carbon tax or scrapping it altogether to the rest of the country. And it's going to be a weird thing playing out, because the federal party is all, like, the NDP is all one party based on their constitution. It's not like you could be a member of the Conservative Party of Canada and then back in Alberta you could be a member of a separatist party. You are all one party as the NDP. So we are seeing a fracture in the NDP party. And this goes to my theory that eventually, and I wish it were sooner rather than later for selfish reasons, that Rachel Notley will challenge Jagmeet Singh for the leadership of the party, I think probably by next year, because they just went through a convention, because she checks a lot of identity boxes for the NDP. She's a woman. She was a premier in a conservative province. She comes from a legacy family with the NDP. So we'll see. But yeah, for selfish reasons, I would like to see her move over to the federal party of the NDP, because a strong NDP results in a conservative government, because it breaks the vote on the left, which is how Harper hung on to power for 10 years. So selfishly, as a conservative, I cheer for the NDP here.
Well, and also a strong NDP would hopefully provide more opposition in the House of Commons than the odd coalition. Well, yeah, that's the entire point of our democracy, is to provide that opposition in the House of Commons. And sadly, we just see this unofficial fringe coalition forming a majority, much to the disgust of many Canadians. Sheila, we have a super chat that we'll just get to. It's kind of on the topic, I suppose. Jojo2585 gives $5. Thank you very much. Is it true that Mark Carney owns either stock or a business of water pumps? I don't know.
I don't think it matters. Mark Carney does something far more sinister. So I don't know if people know, but he is like the climate business czar with the United Nations. He was head of the Bank of Canada, head of the Bank of England, and then he took a job at the United Nations. And part of what he does at the United Nations is impose the DEI strategy on business investment. So divestment, which is exactly what it results in, but diversity, equity, and inclusion and climate change nonsense into business ventures. And really it is just, it's social currency, I guess. So what his policies result in is major oil and gas projects being debanked because they don't check all the climate change boxes. And so you'll see massive multi-billion-dollar energy projects that will provide jobs and affordable energy. And because they don't meet the social credit score of the United Nations, the banks won't provide financing for them. So how do you come up with cash of multi-billions of dollars? You just don't. And these projects don't get done. So that's what Mark Carney does. So I would not say that he has money in water pumps or heat pumps or whatever. I don't think that matters. He's working at a much higher level to make sure energy stays unavailable to the normal people.
And I see here a Shadow, who's a regular in the YouTube chat, would like to hear your take on Trudeau's $8 million barn.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked me about this, because I'm working on a story about this. So this spendy Governor General, who is appointed for, of course, her social justice score. She checked a lot of identity boxes. They're the first Indigenous Governor General. She's been just spending like a crazy person. Like, take away that woman's credit card. And so they built this $8 million barn. And like, I'm a farmer. I can't even fathom what an $8 million barn looks like. Like, I'm looking at pole sheds for like 30, 40, 50,000. I want to put a mother-in-law suite in there. And I'm like, oh gosh. And then I hear about an $8 million barn, and much of the cost associated with this thing were the solar panels on the top.
Of course. Yeah.
Which you can never use in Ottawa. It snows a lot there. You think Mary Simon's going to get on a ladder and clear that thing off? No. Now we have additional costs of hiring groundskeepers to clear off the solar panels, which work for like 1.5 hours a day. And initially it was like an unspecified garage, blah, 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 blah. The problem is we can't figure out who gave the okay on this project. We wrote an article last week that said that the Governor General built a barn, and that is the case because this is on the Governor General's property. So a staffer from the Governor General's office sent a very angry email our way and said, well, no, it's the National Capital Commission who did this, who's in charge of the Governor General's property. Do you think the Governor General ever said, no, we shouldn't build this barn? I object to this barn being built? No. You think if she had objected to the barn being built, it would have gotten built? Also no. So this thing had either explicit or implied approval from the Governor General, who already has a very serious problem with her expenses. And this angry email that I got from this staffer said that, it said, your article is untrue, but never said where it was untrue. And then we offered for her to come on and just have a discussion with me. Okay, tell me what's untrue. And then I'm going to ask you about the role the Governor General played in the approvals process. And then you're going to have to answer that for me. And she didn't come on the show. So now we also know that this came up in committee yesterday because they can't see where this $8 million barn was budgeted for. So who gave the okay for that. And so I guess we'll get to the bottom of that eventually. But the moral of the story is I think they knew that more questions were being asked and they tried to have our story pulled down. And we will not be bullied by this lady at all.
And the really sad part about solar panels too is that by the time they're actually lucrative, which I mean, that's up for debate in and of itself, but by the time you get that return on investment, the ROI on a solar panel, they are obsolete. They're only meant to last 20 to 25 years. And so if anybody in the government thought oh, this is such a great idea, we're going to invest in some solar panels and then we'll see the return on that investment in about 20, 25 years, just as our solar panels are dying and no longer usable. And then, as you mentioned, Sheila, we can't recycle them and there's nowhere for them to go. So then what happens to this? It looks like a pretty serious solar array, especially if it made up the bulk of that $8 million, that will be completely useless and ready for a landfill near you in 20 years, give or take, if they even last that long. Not to mention the fact that, in Ottawa, how usable they'll even be on a day-to-day basis, especially in the winter, is laughable at best. So really, really horrible spending of tax dollars and just not at all any form of a lucrative investment for the governor or for Canadians in general for the cost of, that's a hefty $8 million. This is the pattern that you see with the green energy nonsense, where it's all touted as these beautiful lucrative things, and then when you look into it, it's not actually, the realization is that these things do not live up to their expectations, and if they do, it's very short-lived, and you'll never get any sort of return on the massive investment needed to move them forward. So when I hear about things like
also,
go ahead.
Let's just talk about the expensive remediation after the fact. So in oil and gas, you have to build remediation of your project into the project. You have to reclaim the land and bring it back to its original state, or in the instance of the oil sands, better than the original state. These things are going to break and they're going to leach and they are going to affect the soil and the groundwater at the location where they're at. That is just the cost of doing business with solar panels. And then you're going to have millions and millions and millions of dollars to remediate the grounds after one of these solar panels leaks toxic carcinogenic chemicals into the ground in a national historic site. So good job, Governor General Mary Simon. Thanks for this.
I suppose before we go to an ad break, let's just quickly mention this tweet by Yara Sachs. And she's the former, she's the now Minister of Health, Mental Health and Addictions, and Associate Minister of Health. And she was the one that called Hong Kong when the Freedom Convoy took to Ottawa in January and February of 2022. Hong Kong was, in some strange, twisted version within Yara Sachs's mind, was an acronym for Hail Hitler. That's our Minister of Mental Health now, who may be in her own form of mental health crisis. But this comes after Pierre Poilievre critiqued the Justin Trudeau Liberals for their fiscal policy, or lack thereof. Budgets balance themselves, and their approach to housing as being Soviet style. And then, of course, Yara Sachs, Minister of Mental Health, found this offensive. Poilievre conservatives would rather stigmatize low-income communities than invest in them and their future. While we invest in supportive, affordable homes, they have no plan. This is so ironic. Calling them Soviet style is offensive. Our plan is building more homes today. And I mean, these Liberals, they had 8 years. They have done nothing to build more homes. In fact, their liberal immigration policies have just exacerbated the housing crisis, primarily in Ontario, where the vast majority of immigrants and new Canadians will land, while just not having any sort of forethought into developing solid policy and framework into where exactly newcomers to this country will end up, and if we have enough housing to support them while we continue to support our actual Canadian-born populations. This is a really, really oddly ironic tweet, and again, really weird hysteria coming from the supposed mental health minister, just finding complete offense in the fact that her government has done nothing to fund any sort of new housing development in 8 years, has exacerbated the issue. And when somebody calls them out on it, it's apparently offensive.
This lady's a real piece of work. The idea that we should be just warehousing Canadians instead of opening up land to home construction, repealing some of the restrictions that make it difficult for home builders to make affordable homes for Canadians. The idea that you shouldn't want a backyard or a white picket fence, that you should be happy to raise your 1.5 children in a 600 square foot high-rise coffin in the human zoos of Canadian cities. It's outrageous. We have so much usable land mass, but because of these restrictive, onerous policies from the federal government, only one of which is the carbon tax, but then you add on municipal restrictions, land use bylaws, all manner of nonsense. It almost makes it impossible for developers to build affordable, reasonable-sized homes for Canadians to raise their families in. The Liberals seem to think that we just all need to be stacked on top of each other in these little hamster homes that they think that we should all live in. I'm surprised, however, that she missed a real opportunity here to accuse the Conservatives of being Nazis again, because Soviet style SS, that's a wink wink for Nazis, isn't it? Yara Sachs. Crazy lady. Anyway.
Oh yeah, we need a mental health analysis on that one. Anyway, let's go to a quick ad break, and we'll come back with some Israel-Hamas conflict news.
David Menzies for Rebel News here in downtown Toronto, and I gotta tell you folks, next March 23rd to 30th to be precise, we are going on a Caribbean cruise. Can you imagine that? And a lot of your favorite Rebels will be there, such as Sheila Gunn Reid. We got Alexa Lavoie, the big boss man himself, of course, he'll be there, Ezra Levant. And how about this? How about this for the cherry on the sundae? Tamara Lich, Canada's #1 freedom fighter. She'll be on that boat too. And look at the itinerary. We're going to be going to Half Moon Cay in the Bahamas, and then we're going to jazz it up in Ocho Rios, Jamaica, and then there's Georgetown in the Cayman Islands, and finally Cozumel, Mexico. Can you imagine that? If you want more details in terms of getting aboard the ship, go to rebelnewscruise.com. That's rebelnewscruise.com. All the details are there, the departure dates, the costs, and you know what? This is not just a fun-filled getaway. This is a way in which Rebel News raises some revenue. Unlike the mainstream media, we don't receive a nickel of government funding, nor would we take it if ever offered. So it's win-win. Enjoy yourself in the Caribbean and Mexico, and also support your favorite online news channel. So that's rebelnewscruise.com. I hope to see you aboard.
Come on out November 25th. It's all aboard the Freedom Train in Niagara-on-the-Lake. You can check Rebel News for updates and also the Freedom Passport site.
Tamara Lich, who led the truckers' convoy, will be sharing the stage with some of the finest international recording artists, like the Chops Horns from New York City, who's played with Alicia Keys, Stevie Wonder, the Rolling Stones, and many more. Plus New World Sun, just off a European tour, and the legendary R&B master, Leroy Emanuel. Get on the Freedom Train with Tamara Lich. Saturday, November 25th at Niagara-on-the-Lake Central Community Center, 680 York Road. Get your tickets today at freedompassport.ca. The Freedom Train is coming. Know your rights, know your freedoms.
Okie doke. Let's go into the Israel-Hamas conflict. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. The Israeli government floated a thought bubble, what they call a concept paper, about what to do with these displaced civilians of Gaza, because rooting out the terrorists in that little strip of land is going to be difficult, could be long, will cause devastation to what little infrastructure they have there, considering that all the aid dollars that flow to the Hamas government from Western countries, including Canada, usually go to terrorism. It doesn't go to electricity, running water. I believe the UN builds the majority of the schools there. It doesn't go to healthcare by and large. It goes to weapons caches and paying terrorist families if your terrorist son dies while killing or abducting an Israeli. So they don't have a lot of infrastructure there to begin with. There will not be very much left. So what do you do with the civilians? And Israel floated an idea that perhaps some or many of them could come to Canada, and given Canada's out of control immigration targets, seems like a good fit for Justin Trudeau, because he would surely welcome them. Anyway, the immigration minister said that this is a potential for Canada. They're not opposed to it. This is obviously going to drive up the cost of living in Canada. They got 2.3, I think, million potential refugees from Gaza. I have my own thoughts on this. I say if we're going to spend money on providing aid to refugees, let's do our best to keep them in the region. Let's not give the money to the United Nations, who won't give it to UNRWA, which is an organization linked to money laundering to terrorists. It's the UN refugee organization specifically for Palestinians who are like third and fourth generation refugees. That's not how that works, by the way. Now you're just a resident. I would prefer if we gave it to Egypt and Egypt and Jordan, to King Abdullah II. He's very Western minded. The majority of Palestinians are Jordanian anyway. They're a cultural fit, they're a religious fit, they're an ethnic fit. There will be no barriers to integration for them. So if we are going to give money, and knowing Justin Trudeau, he's going to give a lot of it, I would rather put it in directly in the hands of the governments best suited to absorb these refugees by keeping them in the region, as opposed to plunking them in Canada, where they are going to experience extreme culture shock. The nature of the refugee crisis will mean that many of them will be unvetted, which is a public safety threat to Canadians. And they're just going to do better closer to home. But anyways, let's roll this video now that you have my thoughts on how to solve the world's refugee crisis.
Thanks. And just on another note, Israel's Ministry of Intelligence presented their government with a concept paper that suggested Palestinians could be moved out of Gaza, and that Canada itself could accept them as refugees. What do you say to that idea?
Hard to speculate on it. We are open to those fleeing war. This is a war. At the same time, it's something that it's very difficult for me to speculate publicly on. I haven't read the report, would have to read it. But again, the focus, as I mentioned to your colleague, is to get a humanitarian corridor open to welcome Canadians and their families out of Gaza. It is still very much a pressing concern, and one that remains unfulfilled yet.
Yeah, I've seen some really funny clips of Immigration Minister Mark Miller, but that's a huge concern, the fact that there are still Canadians stuck in the Strip. Canada was obviously extremely slow to act on any of that assistance to get out of the country. I think the U.S. was sending military planes in there as early as the Monday, maybe even late that Sunday. Sadly, October 8th was my birthday. I think that they were already taking action and getting that ball rolling. And meanwhile, Canada just kind of sat idly by and hoped for the best, I guess, sending their thoughts and prayers. But the thing too, when we welcome refugees, and I think a lot of Ukrainians have probably been in this exact same position, when you come to Canada, there's also that cost of living crisis. And so this isn't like the wealthy, prosperous nation that Canada once was very well known for. You come to this country for freedom and wealth, and that is so far from the truth these days under the regime of the Justin Trudeau Liberals, that I think that if we were to welcome any refugees, whether or not that ends up coming to fruition, which I think that, Sheila, you make some much more realistic proposals there, they're going to struggle, and they're going to say, I can't find a job, I can't find anywhere to live, the weather's terrible, and why were we even sent here to be better off? We may have been better off staying where we were from. At least there you have a sense of community, the area, you have your family. The fact that we're welcoming people into Canada when Canada's a mess just seems like even more of a recipe for disaster, not only for, as you mentioned, the people seeking refuge, but for Canadians who we're at our limit. We really can't take on any more. There's not resources or a plan or an infrastructure ready and able to accommodate this kind of influx. But yet we're still seeing it. And I don't know if Minister Mark Miller is prepared to put the brakes on any of this. I had a clip from him, I think about 4 weeks ago, where he said they've been processing 5 million data points a year, and data points obviously refers to people. So that is a massive number for a country that started, in and around 36 million a couple of years ago, to be seeing coming into the country every year, and that's just legally. There's a whole host of others who come in as refugees or cross those borders illegally, and we have no idea where they end up.
Just more over to your point about the Ukrainian refugees, I think this bolsters my point about the Palestinian refugees. So yes, Canada did take in Ukrainian refugees, but if you're going on issues of cultural compatibility, it makes perfect sense for them to come here. They have a community here. Canada, outside of Ukraine and parts of Russia, we have the single largest population of people of Ukrainian descent, and primarily out here on the prairies. Tomorrow, even tonight, I think, depending on when mass time is, I can attend church in Ukrainian. And I do from time to time at St. Sophia's. My kids can take Ukrainian as a second language here because we have so many people of Ukrainian descent. It culturally makes sense for our children to learn Ukrainian as opposed to French, you know, if you have so many Ukrainians here. So there's a church community here. There's an ethnic community here. Plenty of Ukrainian food here, like Ukrainian restaurants everywhere. I mean, do they even have phone books anymore? But if you look in the phone book, you'll find more Ukrainian names than almost anything else here. So for Western Canada to have taken in so many Ukrainian refugees makes perfect sense. They had religious communities that helped sponsor them and charities to help them. It's not like that with the Palestinians. They will be more successful, culturally speaking, closer to home.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And we have another clip here to share. And I'm just trying to watch the time where Judy Trin, she's a correspondent for CTV News, posted this clip of Trudeau where she says this is the strongest language that she has heard yet from Prime Minister Trudeau on Gaza.
We, of course, continue to unequivocally condemn Hamas's abhorrent terrorism, and Israel has the right to defend itself. But the price of justice cannot be the continued suffering of all Palestinian civilians. We are deeply concerned by the catastrophic impact on the population in Gaza, particularly on children, which is why we are calling for humanitarian aid and water and fuel to flow into Gaza. We're calling on humanitarian pauses to allow that to happen. We're calling on the liberation of hostages, on aid to flow in, and on Canadians and their families to get out of Gaza through the Rafah crossing. We are hearing positive things. We are hearing positive news around movement at the Rafah crossing, and we are trying to encourage and make sure that more people, that indeed all foreign nationals, are allowed to.
I got a question. If I'm to believe the left that Gaza is some sort of open air prison, if it is, Hamas made it that way because it wasn't that way when Israel pulled out. But if it is some sort of open air prison, what the heck are Canadians even doing there? Mm-hmm. Why were they there? I have no idea why Canadians were even in Gaza whatsoever. I like how hostages were just a passing thing thrown out. 200 plus civilians still being held hostage by Hamas butchers, and Justin Trudeau throws it out like a throwaway line that Israel doesn't have a right to go get those people. If children and civilians are suffering in Gaza, Hamas did it. They just started a war with Israel apropos of nothing, are still holding Israeli hostages. And by the way, Israel has for weeks now been broadcasting into Gaza, sending text messages to the phones of civilians, telling them to head south because they were starting an incursion to the north. Hamas told them to stay put. Hamas is the organization putting weapons caches under schools and churches and mosques and hospitals. They do that on purpose because they use their people as human shields. If there are civilian casualties, they hang squarely around the neck of Hamas leadership like a millstone. And by the way, where are the conversations with Egypt, Justin Trudeau? You're demanding Israel not liberate its hostages the way it needs to. Where are the conversations with Egypt to get them to open up that border to take in civilian refugees to the south? There's a reason Egypt doesn't want to do that. There's a reason Egypt built their border wall meters under the ground to make sure nobody gets across. It's not anti-Muslim sentiment from the Israelis. I'm reliably informed that Egypt is a Muslim country now. However, it did used to be Christian. And they don't want a mass influx of Palestinian refugees, for the same reason I suggest Canada should consider not taking in a mass influx of Palestinian refugees.
You know, and I find it so funny that, you know, Justin Trudeau seems to come across with such compassion and grace in some of these clips, and like that clip there, and kind of pandering to everybody to make everybody happy. And then in the same stroke, you get his Halloween costume with his son and some photos here that he posted last night onto X, formerly Twitter, where his son is dressed up as a beheaded child. And this, during this time, is so disturbingly out of touch, to put it nicely. I don't even know how his communications team, you know, if anybody had a say on this and who approved this as being even remotely appropriate at this point in time.
Yeah. And I hear people on Twitter saying, you know, it's just Halloween. He's the headless horseman, maybe. I don't know. But these are people with infinite resources. These are also the same people who will scold you if you dress as Pocahontas as being culturally insensitive. And while we just had a spate of beheadings of Israeli citizens, nobody thinks maybe a beheaded child is gonna hit wrong with the Jewish community here in Canada. It's a remarkably tone deaf.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And seems to be kind of the reoccurring theme with Justin Trudeau specifically, but also his cabinet. Sheila, what do you want to prioritize here as we slowly run out of time?
Let's go to this video from Urban Scoop. So it's a video from Urban Scoop. It's the Met Police, so that's in the UK. I think possibly some of the worst police on the planet. I've seen them take knitting needles off old ladies and then boast about keeping this, like taking pictures of them, posting it to their social media, boasting about keeping the streets safe. We saw just the almost riots against McDonald's in London, and not a lot of police crackdown on this. However, the Metropolitan Police have just turned up in the dead of night to arrest a gentleman in front of his distraught wife who's battling stage 4 cancer. His crime? Showing disapproval for Palestinian flags flying all the way along his local high street. Gross. Let's show this video.
No. And to protect a vulnerable person, by means of bail conditions imposed, you do not attend any events involved with Palestine, okay? The reasons why we did this is on the 17th of the 10th of 2023, on Bethel Green Road at 10:04, you were witnesses saying, obviously, people, why are they over here, etc., we let them into our country, etc.
So, big deal.
Yeah, okay.
So, big deal.
Farage's on the television.
Saying it. Take him. Disgusting. He's a disgusting. Absolutely. I'm a stage 4 cancer patient and I need to be here. Make a scene. It should make the scene. You're arresting him because he said something in the street about Hamas, a terrorist organisation.
You haven't been round the block. You don't know what you're talking about. John, have a custody.
Did you hear that?
What?
All those Palestinian flags in Bethnal Green Road, and it disgusting, absolutely disgusting. Why didn't you take them down, John? Why didn't you take them down, John? Nothing in my pockets. Oh yeah, actually I do.
What have you got?
I have working equipment. I have.
Yeah, work two Stanleys in a moment.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, I've got Stanleys in my pocket.
Okay, right. You've got them in your pocket, okay?
What me, man?
I think this is good. You can see the gist of it. So he's being arrested because between the 7th and the 10th of October, so in the immediate wake of beheadings, burnings, kidnappings, rapes, in the immediate aftermath of that, he expressed a public opinion that he thought flying the Palestinian flag in the wake of the single largest attack against the Jewish community since the Holocaust, that he didn't like it. And he said that in public. And so the police are now arresting him. And they showed up there to order him away from the Palestinian, the pro-Hamas, pro-Gaza protests that are happening in London en masse. So absolutely no opposition to these things. It sounds like he didn't do anything violent. He just held an opinion that somebody else didn't like, and the police showed up at his door.
Mm-hmm. This is textbook thought police stuff, right?
Yeah.
This is straight out of George Orwell's 1984. If you engage in wrongthink, then, hey, we're showing up and we're arresting you and holding you in jail for those wrong thoughts. You know, I never thought we would see that kind of display by police and by government officials. You know, that's obviously happening in the United Kingdom, but we saw a lot of similarities, and we continue to see a lot of similarities happen here in Canada as well. And I think the COVID narrative and the COVID handling and unfolding really paved the way to kind of normalize this this type of aggressive policing, thought policing, and political policing. The police used to be independent of politics. And as you see more and more, that is they're more ideologically motivated, and especially if you don't even engage in any sort of violent act, if you just simply have the wrong thoughts, you will be targeted and arrested and have those thoughts, you know, metaphorically beaten out of you, because the process is the punishment in and of itself. And the poor woman, you know, the battling stage 4 cancer, I mean, that in and of itself is stressful. And you can just hear from the video the absolute chaos that's ensuing as she's kind of arguing with the police, and he's telling them, you know, what are you doing? And this is absurd. You can't really hear it, but you get the gist of that's what's happening. And it's just total chaos. And for what? I mean, really, is this justified, and is it appropriate? For what? For what at the end of the day, for what? This is such a massive waste of resources for somebody who just expressed a contrarian opinion to whatever the flavor of the day was for that week.
Olivia says that there are some community notes attached to this video. Okay, at the start of this video, the arresting officer mentions breach of bail conditions as the reason for the arrest. These conditions are specific to this individual, not the general public as a whole. The general public would not be arrested for posting similar content. Okay, so his bail conditions are what? To not publicly express your opinion on this issue? If that is the case, then his bail conditions are BS, garbage, Orwellian gag orders, which is no surprise. We saw that play some pastors here in Canada during COVID. So, yeah. It's just I mean, this is the state of the Western world. You can go and chant from the river to the sea on a street in London, which is a call to genocide. It means from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean, Palestine will be free of Jews, they mean. So you can make a call for ethnic cleansing on the streets of London, but don't you dare express your opinion about all the flags flying in the wake of a terror attack. Otherwise, you'll breach your bail conditions and go right back to the clink. There's more to the story I'd love to know. Let us know. Maybe if you know more of the story, let us know in the comment section. We have 2 minutes left in the show. I just want to get to this quick Joe Rogan thing with Elon Musk. Because when Elon Musk bought X, formerly known as Twitter, we knew that there was a systemic mistreatment of conservatives and stifling of free speech there, while Twitter touted itself as the digital public square, and thus, you know, anything goes except if what you want to go on is anything outside of mainstream liberal ideas. So Elon Musk got in there and he sort of peeled the veil back on Twitter And we always sort of suspected the exchange of ideas between the government and Twitter being quite strong, but it seems as though Twitter was acting as the ministry of truth for the government, and they were perfectly fine with it, which is when you have private companies enforcing the will of the government on the people, that sounds a lot like fascism. But anyways, let's go to this video of Elon Musk on Joe Rogan's show.
What was that like? Because that, to me, that was the most bizarre, was the Twitter files. When you let Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi and all those guys get in the Twitter, and the response where Matt Taibbi gets audited. I mean, which is just wild. I mean, it's just so blatant and so in your face.
Yeah, it's weird. No, I mean, the degree to which, and by the way, Jack didn't really know this, but the degree to which Twitter was simply an arm of the government was not well understood by the public, and it was whatever the official government. I mean, it was like Pravda, basically. It's a state publication is the way to think of old Twitter. It's a state publication.
And was the justification from their perspective that they are progressive liberals, they have the right intentions, it's important that they stay in power, the progressive liberals stay in government and power because this is their...
There was basically oppression of any views that would even, I would say, be considered middle of the road. But certainly anything on the right. I'm not talking about like far right. I'm just talking mildly right. The people like Republicans were suppressed at 10 times the rate of Democrats. Now that's because old Twitter was fundamentally controlled by the far left. It was like completely controlled by the far left.
No surprise there.
No, and I think many of us knew that and really saw that writing on the wall throughout. Again, it was really became more evident and amplified throughout the COVID handling, and it was all about making sure that public health restrictions were being obliged and abided by. Actually, over the weekend, I was in Nova Scotia, and it was a free speech and medicine conference that was taking place there. Yeah. And Aaron Kiri, I always mispronounce his last name, so I'll do my best here, but Kiriati. He was there. He's a lawyer and also a doctor. Maybe he's not actually a lawyer, but he's a doctor. And he spoke about this the global censorship that ensued throughout COVID-19 and its handling. And through Freedom of Information requests, they're called FOIAs in the United States. We refer to them more so as ATIPs here in Canada. He and his team, who have active litigation ongoing against Joe Biden specifically and the U.S. government, they uncovered so much of this, what the government was doing to the former Twitter, now X under Elon Musk, and shared some of those insights. And it's just wild to see some of the communications. And the thing that he discovered was not necessarily they were collaborating necessarily in some of these things, but how much pressure the government put onto Twitter to oblige and to follow direction and to do certain things and tamper with certain algorithms to make sure that under the guise of safety for the general public, because of the public health diktats at that time. And so that was really interesting to see and to learn about this kind of legislation, this kind of litigation that's going forward about this censorship. And it really paved the way to give people the illusion of consensus, right? There was the illusion that everybody agrees that the consensus is in. We all agree the same. We all think the same. And that's a really dangerous thing because it goes almost beyond censorship and really makes you feel like an outcast, like an outsider for questioning or thinking something that the mainstream doesn't want you to necessarily think or feel. So yeah, just getting back to that point, it's really great to see Twitter untangle and unravel that censorship and those algorithms. It's not perfect, obviously. There's still many instances of people being banned or shadow banned or otherwise. But I'm really interested to see how the Canadian legislation will start to impact that. We know that Meta has preemptively blocked Canadian news content due to some of the legislation, the censorship bills instituted by the Liberals. And X so far has not done that, obviously, but there may come a point in time where they could be, metaphorically speaking or otherwise, forced to. So right now it's great to use X, but I don't know how much longer that's going to last here in Canada.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Elon Musk just said, you know what, it's a small market. We don't believe in censorship, so we're just not going to do business in Canada. Because of Canada's censorship policies. However, in my fantasy football world of big tech fighting with the government, I would love to see Elon Musk square off with Justin Trudeau in a squaring match where one of the stupidest people on the face of the earth squares off against one of the smartest in a death match for freedom. That's what I would love to see. It might just be easier though to just say, sorry, Canada, you suck. We'll come back when you repeal your censorship. I mean, that's what I would do. If I were a businessman, that's what I would do. We have one chat left that we should get to. It's from Snowy Roof. It gives us $5 and says, I was reading an article from an Israeli news outlet who looked at polls of Palestinian people on support of Hamas. This is true. There's a reason for this, by the way. Depending on the poll, it ranged from 51 to 75% in favor of Hamas. Yep, bring it to Canada. Yeah, exactly. Now, there's a reason for that, and that's because of the UN-funded Palestinian-run schools. So, not Palestinian-run schools, I should say Hamas-run schools. UN-funded Hamas-run schools. They basically brainwash the little ones into hating Jews, and they staged like little parades and plays about killing the Jew. And so when you come out of that, and that's where you spend your education, and you are also dealing with the Hamas news agencies and Hamas newspapers that are saying completely untrue things about Israel and its place in the world, then yes, of course, you can expect more than 2/3 of the population to support Hamas. They start them young and they keep them indoctrinated. And when you have a government that also says, you know how you have a bad economy and you don't have running water and you don't have electricity and you don't have food, Israel is doing that to you, as opposed to the reality that Israel was providing those things for you. But since we declared war on them, we cannot expect them to provide those things to the enemy any longer. It has to do with the dynamic of both the media and the government and the education system in Gaza, and that's why people feel that way. And I'm not sure that is something that can be very easily undone just by relocating people to a free Western society. I think that's it. We're over time. Tamara and I have to get into a manager's meeting very shortly. Thanks, Tamara, for being my co-host on the show today.
It's good to be back.
Yes. And you weren't rusty at all, not any more than I am. And I do this thing several times a week. Thanks to everybody who works behind the scenes at Rebel News to put the show together so that it's ready whenever you want to watch it, not just live, but after the fact too. Thanks to everybody who tuned in. We couldn't do any of this without your support. And a special thanks to those of you who pitched in a couple of bucks to keep the lights on here at Rebel News. As you know, we'll never take a penny from Justin Trudeau because, how could we hold him to account if we did that? If we were just, as Twitter used to be, an arm of the government. I'm looking at you, mainstream media. So I guess that's it. I think I'm back in the chair again tomorrow with, I don't know, somebody. Anyway, I'll see you guys tomorrow. And as David Menzies always says, stay sane.
We're building homes for the people of Ontario.